Hello, my name is Amanda, and I am myself and my colleague Martina, who is part of the communications team, are hosting this webinar. I should say this afternoon. We're just past 12 o'clock now. So we will kick off, and as I said, you're very welcome and thanks for attending. I'm just going to hand you over to Martina, who'll just run through a few brief housekeeping issues, and then we'll move on with a short presentation. Thanks, Martina.
Oh, thanks, Amanda. Hi, everyone. As you've likely noticed, we're using the Zoom webinar function, which means you can see us, but we can't see you. But you're very welcome to use the chat if you'd like to say where you're coming, your organisation and where you're from. And we'd encourage you to chat with the fellow attendees in the chat. But while Amanda's given her presentation, if you could pop any questions you have for her into the questions and answers box. If you look down the bottom of the screen there, you'll see it. It's the fourth tab over. We will be reviewing the questions that you put in at the end, and we'll be generating a frequently asked questions handout, which we'll upload to our website after this webinar. And finally, just to let you know that we are recording this webinar and we'll be uploading it to the scheme's webpage within the next 24 hours. So that's all from me. I'll just hand you back to Amanda now.
Thanks, Martina. I just see two messages there already saying that the chat is disabled, but do we really need to use the chat, Martina? I think the main thing is any questions go in the queue.
Yeah, the main questions for yourself, if people can pop those into the questions.
That's great. Thank you. This is a very brief presentation because really this is an opportunity for you to ask questions and for us to provide answers as best we can. So I've just a few slides here. And in case you're not aware, the Heritage Organisations Fund is a renamed version of the Heritage Capacity Fund. So those that will be familiar with that fund and have been successful in applications, if you intend on applying again, it's through the Heritage Organisation Support Fund 2024. So just to move on, and the time frame, as you're probably aware, we opened on the 14th of November, actually about 3 weeks earlier than last year. Closing date, the 15th of January at 5 p.m. sharp. The system shuts down. Maximum grant request is 60,000, and we will let you know in writing in early March after our council board meeting of the outcome of your application. If you are successful, you will have to submit your final paperwork to us by the 15th of November 2024. Match funding is not required. And just briefly, the assessment process is screening, and that will include financial checks. So that's somebody with a financial expertise looking at constitutions and governance issues. Then it'll be moved on, if it passes that check, onto internal professional officers review, and then to external panel assessment and scoring. Now, shortlisting does take place between the internal professional officers assessment and then on to the external panel assessment. And finally, then our board meet at the very beginning of March to approve funding. I just thought of something there. Apologies. Sorry, apologies. Now I thought of something I was going to say. Oh yeah, the screening. I was just going to say, to give you an idea from experience, just under 50% of applications we get to most of our schemes fail at that stage because they don't provide the required or mandatory supporting information, or their eligibility doesn't comply with the grant scheme. So make sure at that first hurdle that you do have all the mandatory information in and that you are eligible to apply, because we don't want wasting your time. The application process does take time, and if you're not eligible or you don't have the required supporting information, you fail at that first stop. Okay, who can apply? Now, this is mandatory for all organisations that apply. You must be not-for-profit, non-governmental, heritage-focused organisation with a demonstrated national or regional relevance. The regional relevance is new for this year. Your organisation must be a company limited by guarantee, that's a CLG. It cannot be controlled either directly or indirectly by a state or other body. So that's like a CLG that has been set up by a local authority or under another state body. Those types of organisations need to look at the Heritage Stewardship Fund, which is currently opened with the same deadlines, and we actually have a webinar tomorrow. The constitution of your organisation must prohibit payment of remuneration to the directors. Now, I understand from advice I got that if this isn't clearly stated in your constitution, that it's fairly straightforward to change. If there's a meeting of the directors, that clause can be inputted into your constitution in advance of applying to us. And the purpose of your organisation, this is where we come to national or regional relevance, and also that it's heritage focused, is that it must relate to an aspect as mentioned under the Heritage Act 1995, 2018, or else the UNESCO Convention for Intangible Cultural Heritage. So this is mandatory for anyone that applies to us. So what we can fund. Now, there's a slight change on last year in that last year we did fund more project-specific applications, whereas this year we're solely focused on operational type costs. So that will be staff salaries, rents, rates, legal responsibilities, heating, lighting, all those things that you need to pay to keep your organisation afloat. We will also, well, we were looking at this in previous years as well, to funding like business plans to make you more resilient, governance improvements, risk management reviews, anything like that in the line of good governance and best practice. For professional institutions, we will be funding bursaries or professional training and CPD courses on heritage. Also training and skills development costs. And that's really to do with in-house staff or staff you're taking on, and also the last hiring of new or contracted staff. So if you have a project-specific plan in mind, you really should be looking at the Community Heritage Grant Scheme. This isn't the grant scheme for you. This is about operational costs and making your organisation more resilient. So just a few tips on making your application. Can't stress enough, before you start, please read and understand the application guidance documents. For those who will be familiar with the Heritage Capacity Fund, they will have noticed that there is big changes this year. We have a new application form in place, and we've new assessment criteria. And this is really on foot of our new strategic plan. We want organisations to help us deliver our key objectives. So the application form is very much structured around that. You have to identify where your work plan fits in to our headings. So there's a checklist on page 15 of the guidance document, and I would urge you to use this to make sure, as I said earlier about screening, that you have all the supporting documents you need attached. The list on the checklist, the items 1 to 6 apply to all organisations. The 7th item is about the recruitment of new staff. So that only is to do with that in that area, and you must supply a job description for the new post. Make sure your work plan is achievable and you have it clearly defined and linked to the Heritage Council strategic plan. Remember, this is a 9-month application, or I don't want to say project, but you have a 9-month window to get to deliver this and achieve your outcomes. So you've only March to November, so make sure it is achievable. There is a list of outcomes we've provided this year, and you will have to identify at least two of those outcomes. And if you are successful, it will be part of your final reporting to us to show how you have achieved those. And you must demonstrate a willingness to communicate and promote your work and the role of the Heritage Council. And we do prompt you on the application form to tell us about your communication plans, how you're going to reach a wider audience, online activity stats, attendance numbers at community engagement projects or citizen science. Moving on, and I would say the application form, while it is new, I think anyway, it's actually clearer than previous years because there's a lot of prompts and there's also a lot of drop-down boxes. So it's a matter of clicking which item most represents your work plan. And we also this year have additional questions which we won't be scoring on. I hate to say it, I think there's about 12 of them, but they're very short. They're drop down boxes again, and that's really to help our communications team profile the types of organisations we're funding, and for key reporting that hopefully will help us get more funding in the future for this scheme. So continuing with general advice, while this isn't mandatory, I've seen it at assessment panels. Assessors love photographs, they love images. So if you have images of community engagement events that you've hosted, please attach them. The same for if you're working in wildlife habitats, a map identifying the exact area that you're planning to work, anything like that always helps. As they say, a picture speaks 1,000 words. To leave ample time to complete your application. There's always a mad panic the last day or two with people trying to get information up. The last day is chaotic, and we've seen it where people at 5:05 are ringing us in a stressed manner because they were about to press the button or they were in the middle of uploading something and the system shut down. So that's a terrible, we don't want to see anyone in that position. So if you are having trouble, any kind of technical trouble on the afternoon, or indeed in the week running up to it, do contact us sooner rather than later. If you contact us at 5:10 or 6:10 telling us there was a problem, we can't really do anything for you then. But if you contact us at 2:10 that afternoon, we certainly can try and help, and we will help. All files uploaded will be checked for viruses, so you will see a notice. Don't panic, you continue to work on your application and you can submit while that notice is still appearing. It's always a good idea to get somebody to read over your application, and especially check that you have those supporting documents uploaded. And I can't stress this enough, while we, Amanda, Martina, or other people in the Heritage Council staff might know your work and everything that you do, we're not the ones that will be scoring you. It'll be external assessors, and they may not be familiar with your work. So the application is your chance to make the case. So put yourself in the shoes of the grant assessor and answer all questions in a clear and concise way. And just on aside but an important issue, if you haven't registered or you're not a member of the Wheel, I would strongly advise it. For those that have an income of over 25,000 annually, I think the membership's around €75, but they provide so many training opportunities, valuable resources. They have, even on their website, they have advice and guidance on best practice for non-profits. Governance is a huge issue now, and they have various documents relating to that. Another very good website is Carmichael Ireland, and again they offer free advice to not-for-profit organizations, so really they should be on your hit list. And just to finish off, if you're in doubt at all, contact us, and please, so that we can give a more informed response, direct queries to grants@heritagecouncil.ie. And I've just put a link to our strategic plan on the last page there. So that document's really important because, as I said, the application form is really it surrounds all the main pillars, or it looks for you how you're going to deliver our objectives. So it's really important that you have a look at that and see how your work fits into that plan. So I won't keep you anymore, and we'll start answering questions. Thanks very much.
Amanda, the first question is from Matthew Farrell, our former Heritage Hero in the Maria Edgeworth Centre. And he's just wondering, they've just completed a collections audit funded by ourselves, and can we apply for collection software under this scheme?
I would think, Matthew, that would be something we'd look at under the community grant scheme. And indeed, in the past, we have actually supported applications for specific type of software. There is what we call a specialised equipment, and that kind of software would fall in under that. So I would advise an application. The community grant scheme, we're hoping to launch around mid-February, so we will have more details on that near the time. Thanks, Matthew.
I've two questions from Joan Whelan. They are a newly constituted CLG, so they don't have audited accounts as yet. Is that okay, or she's wondering what do they need to do in that case? They don't have any public or private funding at the moment. Oh. And regarding the Constitution and the requirement around aims, does the Constitution need to mention the Heritage Act, or, as you just mentioned, are general aims in the Constitution sufficient?
No, the Constitution doesn't need to name the Heritage Act, but the more important thing about the Constitution is that it does include that clause about non-payment to directors. I will have to check about the audited accounts, or the accountant, or what do we call them? Accountant verified accounts for new groups. I'm not quite sure. I don't have the answer with me now. I'll have to check with our head of finance. Joan, if you could email me separately at grants@heritagecouncil.ie, I'll follow up with our head of finance on that. It's an important question, and because we would like to see a lot more newer groups benefiting from this funding. So and I'm sure there's a lot of groups out there that are newly formed and newly constituted. So I will need to clarify that with our head of finance.
Amanda, we've two questions from Orla Egan. The first is, they had employed staff under the Heritage Capacity Grant in 2023. If they apply for funding for these staff, does that count as new staff?
Hi, Orla. No, I don't think so, no. But it would be no harm maybe if you had submitted a post description with last year's. It would be no harm uploading it again this year. it would be helpful. Is there any, oh, sorry, Martina, I'm moving on ahead.
No, you're grand. Oral is also asking, is there any sign of this funding becoming 12-month or multi-annual funding, because it's quite challenging to only have 8 to 9 months, you know, to draw down the funding and that.
Yeah, agree, Orla. We, our head of finance, our head of finance is looking at that, but that's something we can't make a decision on. We have to petition the department. I know some organisations do have that flexibility. At the moment, we don't. But as I said, it won't be in place for next year, but it is something that I know our head of finance is very eager to see implemented. And it certainly would help us with our budgets as well, in terms of pinch points. And it is very difficult for organisations when it's they have to contract staff and salary stop start. So it is on the agenda, but it won't be in place for 2024.
The next question is a history mural more under the community grant scheme.
A history, sorry, Martina?
History mural. Like a mural on a...
Yeah, I'm not, interpretation, I'm not even sure if it's something that we would currently fund under our present grant schemes, even the community. I'm not sure where you're located. It's certainly, we have under our Irish Wall Towns, but your town would have to be a member of that. It's something we've funded there. Interpretation under our community grant scheme is very much geared towards access for people with disabilities or diversity and inclusion. So I'm not sure that would even fall under that scheme, unless there was something additional that, you know, that it covered that accessibility issue.
Amanda. Rosemary is wondering, could they apply for this grant and the Community Heritage Grant Scheme?
There's nothing to stop you from doing that, but we do, when we are looking at grants, we do look at those that we have funded, we'll say, under the this particular grant scheme. And if another application comes under community, we might have to prioritise. There's nothing to preclude you from doing it, but just be aware that we may have to prioritise and say, look, we've already given funding to this organisation. There's too many applications here. We can't, award another from another grant from another round. So I can't say yes or no, but you're not precluded from doing it.
Muireann from Boyne Rivers Trust is wondering, could you apply for staff costs and training costs? So just say training and core costs, a combination of both.
Yes, you can. Yes.
Let me see. Pierce is asking, to follow on from the requirement around audited accounts, does the small business exemption apply here for small organisations, or do they have to get audited accounts?
We have to have, it's either audited accounts or accountant verified accounts. So there's the option of either or. So they have to be verified. But if you haven't got audited accounts, they have to be verified by an external auditor.
Okay. Claire Curran at the workhouse in Dunfanaghy, they recently completed a conservation report on the building. In protecting and becoming more, it was funded by their. Would this funding support a new sustainable approach to heating and lighting system for the building? It's probably more community.
Yeah,
not really.
So when you say, I'm not quite sure what you mean by, we'll be putting in it'd be like retrofitting a new system.
Yeah,
I don't.
making the building more sustainable.
Sustainable. Well, it is something I think that may fall under community, because it's certainly something the whole sustainability, climate change actions are certainly big under all our schemes. But I know we do encourage reporting on energy efficiency and things. So it's definitely wouldn't fall in under this scheme, but I think it may be something that would be considered under the community grant scheme.
Just check here. Don and Harvey, our group is 10 years old and we are a CLG as well as a registered charity. Will this new fund help to establish a salaried staff officer to help bring the project, the Letterkenny Cathedral Culture, to the next level?
You could apply as a CLG. Yes, you could apply for a staff member. Last year, I know we did, for small organisations, we did fund the salary of an administrator, and where they had previously no staff at all. So yes, that's certainly something. And just to point out as well, it just went on to mention charity. You don't have to have charitable status to apply for this grant scheme. The CLG bit, that's the important thing in terms of your company status.
Can you confirm that an organisation with a focus on biodiversity, nature-based solutions would be eligible?
Yes, as long as you can make the case within the application that your work plan, as I said, will help achieve the objectives of our strategic plan.
This is a finance question, Amanda, from Jerry O'Halloran. If they were applying to hire an office manager, how do we reconcile the March to November timescale regarding the salary?
Some of the groups that we funded last year literally just took on contracted staff for that period of time. It is unfortunate, but that's all we can offer funding for. So if it's a full-time post you're planning, then you'd have to have a plan to cover it in the interim. And we can't, as Orla pointed out earlier on, that we don't have kind of multi-annual, it doesn't roll over from one year to the next, so there are gaps. So if you're taking on full-time staff or full-time staff member, you have to have a plan to be able to fund them for the subsequent months, and there's no guarantee from year to year that you will get funding. So that's something for the organisation to consider. But most groups that applied last year just took on a contracted staff member.
We've two questions from Louise Harrington. She's also supporting Orla's point earlier about multi-annual funding, that it would be very useful, you know, if the timescale is extended that way. And absolutely. Can she check if groups who are constituted as an organisation with charitable status but not a CLG are outside of this scheme?
I didn't know that you could be a charity without being a CLG. I'll have to check that with our head of finance. Would you mind popping me an email and I'll redirect it and we'll get an answer for you? I don't know. CLG seems to be it's a must, but I don't have an answer for you now. I'm sorry.
Rosemary's just wondering, if you apply for costs such as light and heat, will it only apply to bills during the period of that?
It would really, yeah, because we can't. Again, this isn't something that we have power over. Excuse the pun, but it's the way our funding is allocated from the department. So we don't have we can't fund before we assess applications, and we can't fund costs that aren't in retrospectively or that aren't that fall within that timetable of kind of early March to November 15th or whatever it is. Yeah.
Muireann is wondering if applying for staff costs, is there a pay scale they should benchmark against? Sorry.
We don't have it, but I'd imagine whatever professional body that the person you're going to take on is kind of, they'd have kind of pay scales that are, I mean, we talk about the living wage, but we have something about that in our guidelines. But in terms of salary, it really would be driven by kind of what's the norm within the profession.
Does this funding only cover staff salaries for 9 months, or can it find a contribution to all salaries?
You can put in for existing salaries. It doesn't have to be for a new person. So it can go towards your co-cost. So if you have 5 staff, you can you'll have to put in a costed work plan. So it can be a portion of it can go to existing work or existing salary costs.
A couple of people asking if they can apply for this scheme and the Community Heritage Grant Scheme.
You can, but there's no guarantee that the Community Grant Scheme is very it is about projects, start, finish. And this doesn't cover that. So you can apply, but there's no, it's very competitive. So there's no guarantee that, because we're trying to spread the funding out to as many organizations as possible. But if it's a really strong application, it might, it could get funding. And we did last year, we funded groups under 2, not very few, but who got funding under 2 different schemes.
Niall is wondering what's the ratio of number of applications to successful grantees?
It's usually less than 50%. We usually, it would be less than 50%. Under the Community Grant Scheme, it's even like, for instance, I think we had something like 350 applications for this year, and we funded about 140 or something like that. This scheme, we don't get as many applications. Last year we had about 67 applications, and we funded about 30 organisations, and our funds will probably be pretty much the same for next year. So we'd be looking at about 30 organisations again. Now, not all organisations look for the maximum of 60,000. So it depends on the level of funding that's been sought and our budget.
Percy is wondering if you could give an example of previously funded projects or organisations under the fund.
Okay,
it's on our website.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can send that to you separately, Percy.
Yeah. We publish, as a public body, we publish our grantee recipients. So there are lists on our website, so you can, and the previous years as well.
Carleen is wondering, would an application that continues the work of the Heritage Capacity Fund 2023 be considered?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yeah.
Anne is wondering, would an old forge with implements be able to apply? Is that for a project, or is it for overheads? It sounds like it could be project specific, so that would come under Community Grant Scheme.
Yeah.
Joyce, Tower Museum, can they apply for funding for visual design assets like logo, typeface, etc.?
It probably wouldn't really be a priority, to be honest. If it was part of a larger application, maybe, but it wouldn't be a standalone application for something like that, rebranding. probably wouldn't be a huge priority.
Does this grant cover the cost to develop a current heritage exhibition?
It wouldn't really, I'd say again under that would be something, because that's kind of a project start and finish. So I would suggest the Community Heritage Grant Scheme for that.
Okay. Carol is wondering from Meg Rivers Trust that she's currently the acting project officer until the end of December this year. Can they apply for funding for this position to be maintained into 2024?
Yes, you can apply, but it'd be a fresh application. So you'd have to make the case all over again. And the same thing applies. It will be just for the 9 months.
Mm-hmm. I think you covered this, Amanda, in your presentation, but you might remind people, when will the results be known for this scheme? Is it before the deadline for the community grant scheme?
We don't know. It'd be early. Our council board meet, I believe, on the 2nd of March. So we will have results out that week, shortly thereafter. We haven't a date set in stone for the community grant scheme because we're hoping to have a new system in place, a new grant system in place for that. So we're planning kind of around the 16th of February, but that's not in stone. Mid-February, we'll say, and we'd have a 4-week window for people to apply, so it would be still open.
Okay. If you apply for the 60,000, could you end up receiving part of this if not successful for the full amount?
You could. Last year we had one group where we weren't able, just because of the demands on the budget. They had they had put in a proposal and we only funded kind of one element of the proposal because the demand and the other element wasn't considered. It was felt by the assessment panel that it could hold out for another year. Yeah, we can, but it's not something it's more an exception than the rule. We try to give what people are looking for, because experience has shown us if we start cutting costs or trying to spread it too thinly, sometimes these plans don't work out, because then groups have to go off and try and revise their budgets and come up with a plan B, and it doesn't work out. So we would almost rather say no, we're sorry, than start paring back on applications. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question.
And can you apply for an audience and development or an education and outreach role?
Yeah, like a salary for a person, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure to put in the description of the post, like the brief, yes.
John is wondering, can a project previously funded under the community grant scheme receive support under this grant scheme if new project phases are ongoing and deemed of national significance?
Again, is it project specific, or is it I'm not really able to answer that because I don't know enough detail. But again, I go back to what we fund. It's salaries, rents, rates, training, helping to make organizations more resilient. Whereas if it's kind of phases of a project, it sounds more like a community grant application.
Paula is wondering, you mentioned altering a constitution. How easy is it to change aspects of a constitution?
Well, I'm not an expert, but I did, because I know some of the groups we have dealt with in the past, while they are CLGs, they mightn't have that clause about remuneration to directors. And I did check with someone that would be an expert in financial issues. and seemingly it is relatively straightforward. If there's a meeting of the directors has to be called, and it can be inserted, and then it's more about notifying then the whoever you notify about a CLG, but it's really about the directors ratifying the change. So seemingly it isn't that complicated at all, and you don't have to wait for approval or anything like that from like the company's division or whoever. So it's something you as a group with your directors can do.
Pierce is wondering, are capital costs like a vehicle covered by this grant?
Capital costs like a vehicle.
A vehicle.
We did fund a vehicle this year, but it wasn't like a car or anything like that. It was a specialized piece. I don't even, well, it is a vehicle. It does, a person gets it. It was some kind of I don't know what I call it, a buggy, but it was a specialized piece of equipment that was needed on an island where they were tracking bird populations, and it was a specific type. It came from the UK or somewhere like that, and it was purpose built. So we did fund that, but not like a car or anything like that. No, it would. And actually, the piece of equipment I'm talking about, or the specialized buggy, we funded that or supported that through the community grant scheme. But not a car, no.
Jerry is wondering, can some directors' expenses be paid?
Well, when you say some directors, or sorry, when you say some expenses, like out-of-pocket expenses, like if, you know, as normal, yeah, but not when we say remuneration for, it would be like for doing work or paid a fee or anything like that. That's what we're referring to, not where they have out-of-pocket expenses as a result of being on the board of the organisation.
Don and Harvey, here's a follow-on question. Do you give out the name of the organisation of received funding to employ an administrator when they previously had none?
Do we give funding?
Do you give out the name of the organisation? Sorry, I don't really understand that question, Don, and you might just might just come back to us again with that. Will the Q&A be available to view after the meeting is over?
Well, what we were thinking of doing, Martina and I were discussing it before the meeting. We're going to save the questions, and we're going to come up with frequently, we'll just edit to look down through them so there's not repeats, and put up frequently asked questions on our website. That'll be, we'll have it early next week or so.
Alice is wondering, would the replacement of the entrance door and windows to be more energy efficient to be funded?
Not under this scheme, but you could make the case under the community grant scheme, but our community grant scheme is very much about the conservation of buildings. So there has to be, you'd have to have good conservation advisor on board to make sure that it's just not a matter of pulling out windows and historic doors. They would be able to advise on the best approach to make the building more energy efficient. But it's not something under this. It certainly is something to consider, as I said, under the community grant scheme, but you would need a conservation advisor on board, someone with that kind of specialist knowledge.
From Kevin Murphy, if applying for archival support, including an archivist's salary, would the applicant better be focusing on a specific collection, or could it be used for working on a number of collections within the repository?
That's a good question. I suppose it depends on the nature of the contract. If you're taking on board a new person, how much they can achieve within the time frame and what kind of contract it's going to be. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that in terms of what collection you'll be looking to work on. That's really, you know, your organisation's decision. But certainly the archivist's position, their salary could be funded under this.
Let me check. I think we're nearly there, Amanda. Yeah, Orla just wants to clarify the deadline for applying for the community grant scheme will be mid-March. So that is after the date of the notification of this grant, the outcome of this scheme.
Yes. Now, I don't, as I said, that comes with a caveat. I don't have it. None of us know yet the exact dates for the community grant scheme, but we will ensure that there is an opportunity for those that applied for this scheme to have a chance to apply for the community.
Santiago, your query is very specific, so I'd encourage you just to contact Amanda at grants@heritagecouncil.ie, just to clarify the answer on that. Okay, thank you. That's it, I think, Amanda.
Okay. If you think of any more queries, certainly send them in. And for the two attendees that had the specific query about the CLG versus charity, and there was another one as well, if you email me in, I will direct those straight away to our head of finance, and we will get back to you. Donna, I think a question flashed up there. If you want to email directly as well, and I know it is good to talk to other organizations who kind of were in the same position as you are now, and to share some ideas, so I can get back to you through email. Oh, thank you, Deirdre. I hope we were able to answer your questions. Sorry, I see something in the chat, Martina. What's the creative heritage? Sorry,
oh yeah, Sean's looking for a link to the Community Heritage Grant Scheme. We don't have that information published as yet, so.
Oh, I see. Martina has been, and Martina's little elf in the background. She's been
answering some of the questions I could.
So again, thank you so much for attending. We didn't want to keep you too long, and do keep questions rolling in. It's better to check with us than assume, and the very best of luck with your application. And thanks very much to everyone again.